This is the S2G podcast, where we share conversations that help us understand how to scale the food, agriculture, oceans, and energy transitions. I'm your host, Tanya Bekritzes. In this episode, we get in the weeds on agricultural data insights with S2G portfolio company Sentera. As a reminder, this content is for informational purposes only. It should not be taken as legal, business, tax, or investment advice, or be used to evaluate any investment or security, and is not directed at any investor or potential investor in any investment vehicle sponsored by S2G. Investing involves risk, including the risk of loss. Specific companies mentioned in this podcast are for educational purposes and should not be construed as an endorsement of any kind. Please note that S2G may maintain investments in some of the companies discussed on this podcast. For more important information, please see s2gventures.com/disclosures. I'm really excited to bring you this episode with our portfolio company, Sentera. Not only does it dive into Sentera's evolution and current strategy, but there are so many insights for all kinds of companies, agricultural and otherwise. In short, Sentera uses remote data collection to empower growers and agribusinesses to make real-time decisions on the field that can help improve profitability. Sentera is also a company that has managed to evolve significantly over the past decade, while maintaining a commitment to its mission and an appreciation of the inherent advantages and how to capitalize on them. For this episode, our managing partner, Chuck Templeton, interviewed Sentera's CEO, Brian Wingatz, and founder and CTO, Eric Taipola, as well as Cristina Rohr, managing director at S2G. They talk about how they came to understand their core differentiators, how they identified the problem that they needed to solve, and how they think about business model innovation in a difficult-to-penetrate sector. We'll get into all of that, but first, here's a quick rundown of what Sentera does from Brian.
The goal of the business is to combine expertise in a couple different areas of technology and to apply it to help either growers or those that support growers produce a better crop, save more time, or have better insights into decision making. Those two areas of expertise were unmanned aerial imagery, so high resolution imagery, sensor development, combined with deep expertise in computer vision, machine learning, deep learning capabilities, AI, to be able to take large files and large sources of data that were imagery-based and be able to pull information out of them to help growers.
Sentera has been on a journey of figuring out how exactly they can use their expertise to best serve farmers. But let's start from the beginning, because even the founding of the company was a lesson in recognizing a new opportunity and diving in.
My name is Eric Taipola. I'm the CTO of Sentera. Way back in 2014, I was one of the founders. This is actually my 26th year working with unmanned systems, which I've now grudgingly agreed that we're going to call drones. I and the team that founded the business came out of the aerospace industry.
But Eric wasn't really an airplane guy.
I'm a software person, and I was always more engaged with the electronics that drive the airplane, but especially the sensor packages and the mission systems that go and exploit the data that's coming off of those sensors.
And now to that fortuitous incident.
So through a kind of a strange set of circumstances, actually what happened is a person who was supposed to make a call to a company near the Twin Cities where I live got sick and called me on a Sunday night and said, "Can you go visit this company that's doing agriculture and they want to buy drones from," at the time, Lockheed Martin, where I worked. And I said, sure, that sounded like high entertainment value to me. And I drove down about an hour and a half away from my house, and the world changed. I was introduced to the idea and some of the problems that existed in agriculture around data scarcity, around low quality data, around growers and agronomists that were making the best decisions they could, but they weren't very good decisions because they're essentially starved for information about the fields and so on.
So Eric jumped into the world of agricultural data, but figuring out what this new company would actually look like took some trial and error.
There's a great story for probably another episode about learning from failure because it wasn't a direct leap right into Sentera. We made an intermediate stop as a team into something that didn't turn out very well, but our piece turned out very well. And we were fortunate in learning through that negative experience a lot about what customers were looking for, what they valued, made some great connections, and ended up with Sentera's angel investor being a relationship that was developed in that first year that wasn't part of Sentera, but they saw the value of really timely, actionable, high precision data informing the more targeted use of the micronutrients products they were building. And today we're doing it obviously with very different technology and a much different scale. But that's really how we came to be, was just a very serendipitous introduction to the whole food and agriculture segment 10 years ago.
A few years ago, Brian joined the company.
My name is Brian Wingatz. I'm the CEO at Sentera. I joined Eric really as his business partner in early 2022, so 2.5 years. I spent 14 years at a software portfolio company that was private equity backed, and the strategy behind that business was really acquire and grow and acquire and grow. So a lot of inorganic activity. I had the good fortune or bad fortune, however you would classify it, of being a part of 37 different M&A transactions. You really get exposed to what companies are doing well, what companies aren't doing well, and good acquisitions really come with a couple key components. And it really all revolves around differentiating technology, one, and great people, two, and a company that prioritizes listening to their customers, right? And if you have those ingredients, typically you're going to find a lot of success.
Brian had a pretty good understanding of the recipe for scale and exit, but he was working in cybersecurity and it wasn't really doing it for him.
And frankly, the mission of solving some of these major challenges that the agricultural industry is going to be faced with over the next 15 to 20 years, and feeding a population that is growing for the world and doing it with much less resources, climate impact. It's a little easier to get up every day and kind of fight that cause versus fight the cybersecurity criminals.
So when he found Sentera, it felt like a good fit.
So it was a good transition, and Sentera itself obviously had a lot of significant advantages. It had a lot of blue chip customer relationships, great growth, obviously a great team, but a vertical technology stack that is differentiating. And what I mean by that is the company does not rely on any third party to source any of the sensors that it uses to collect a lot of the precision imagery that it needs in order to deliver value. So I think that to me, showed as a good opportunity to make a pretty big difference in market opportunity and growing the business.
S2G first invested in Sentera in 2018. Cristina explained the investment thesis behind it.
When we invested in Sentera, it was really premised on a broader thesis we had that advancements in technology can really help with better agronomic decisions. And those could increase yields or better profitability outcomes for the farmer. When we think about some of the technology advancements, right now, farms are managed on very broad decision-making. But what technology can do is effectively bring the decision-making from the field level down to the acre and down to the plant, which is extremely powerful. And when we think about some of the economics for the farmer, so looking at soybeans and corn, right now, we can only access about a third of the theoretical yield potential for corn and soybeans. If you think about moving the precision technology to the plant level, can enable astounding productivity gains and yield potential on some of the crop and soybeans. When we looked at Sentera, some of their crop decision-making process, the ability to collect the imagery, the computer vision, enabled very specific early decision-making to either prevent disease and look into areas where decision-making could happen sooner to enable some of the yield potential, or also reduce costs. And their initial value proposition was based on a hardware system. They had a drone and sensor combination, collecting data and effectively using that data to determine predictive outcomes for in-season crop growing. And what we liked about it was that the accuracy of the data collection plus the possibility to build models on top of these data could create some of the things that could change farmer practices, and that could translate in lower costs and also better sustainability outcomes.
At the beginning, Sentera was an agricultural drone manufacturer helping farmers track changes in crop health over time. Though the company has evolved its technology and objectives, Sentera's core mission and capabilities have remained constant.
I think Sentera had a deep technical bench, which is obviously a prerequisite for success. But we were very fortunate early on. The things we decided were going to differentiate us, we were going to go for the high end of precision, and we were going to go for the high end of accuracy in the data products that we produced. And then we were going to augment that with a data science team, a deep learning team that was going to try and solve hard problems. So our differentiation is really, over the last 10 years, that's been the constant. 10 years ago, it was actually very hard to count corn plants in a field with the technology that was available. We were the only ones that were doing that at the time. Now, we still do that product, but there are others that do that probably at least as well, because it's not really a very hard problem anymore in technology. So I think as a business, we've been quick to identify that which is no longer differentiating and to move ahead to areas where we do have good opportunities for differentiation. So the progression of Sentera has really been marked by what are the most difficult problems, because they tend to have the highest economic value as well. So the march out of maybe generalized insights to what is a phenotyping insight for a breeding customer, where it's a very fine-grained assessment of some measure of plant performance. What's an analytics insight around nutrition that we can develop because we've got such a deep bench, all the way from the sensing through the analytics to the software platform that really nobody else can do. That's Sentera's unfair advantage.
Today, Sentera's main product is Aerial Weed Scout, which uses their drones to conduct a rapid analysis of weed location on a farm. The goal is to enable proactive, informed decision-making around weed control. Brian shared why they decided to focus on weeds as a use case.
We had a lot of success trying to apply the technology to different verticals. We were using the technology to support retailers in having better in-season decision-making platforms for their growers. We were supporting R&D organizations doing plot-based research and a lot of data collections. And I think when the Aerial Weed Scout opportunity started to develop even further for us, we both looked at each other and said, this is the bet that we really need to place a lot of our resources on. What provides value to a grower, right? Is it just insights? Is it just data? It's helpful, right? But they're not necessarily willing to pay a lot for that, right? What they're willing to pay for is something that is truly measurable to their outcome, whether it be profitability, whether it be better yield, or time savings, right? If they can save more time in a growing season, that's incredibly valuable to them. So with Aerial Weed Scout, it became very apparent to us that there were structural advantages to the technology over existing solutions in the market that were being rolled out. And we also knew that it could provide a measurable impact, a measurable benefit that growers could take advantage of. And ultimately, we know that really nothing gets adopted in agriculture if it doesn't directly benefit the grower.
Eric explained how Aerial Weed Scout really made sense as the next step for the company.
When we get to Aerial Weed Scout, that brings together all of Sentera's unfair advantages and packages them into something that has just this really crisp value proposition. Don't spray herbicide where it's going to be wasted. Save the money and take it to the bottom line. Everybody can understand that value proposition, but it's super hard to find a weed that's 6 millimeters wide in the field, figure out where it is, figure out how to tell the tractor where that is, and then just put chemistry on that weed and not on the surrounding area. It plays to every single strength we have, from deep learning through advanced sensing to the software platform, through the commercial relationships we have, understanding of the value stream around seeds and traits and so on. And that's, for us, that's been the key for 10 years, is just make sure we're doing something that's really hard for anybody else to do because of the skills we have in place.
Can you walk us through, Eric, a little bit more of what that insights were that got you to the aerial weed scout and how that sort of translates to farmer benefits, which is the big opportunity here?
Yeah, we're introduced to the technology behind aerial weed scout actually by John Deere, who's a significant player in targeted application. They had at the time a sprayer that was going to come online where you could turn the individual nozzles. Sprayer is a big, long boom behind a tractor with nozzles on it. And the neat thing about this new sprayer was the nozzles could be turned on and off individually. And there are useful things that could be done. But they said, you guys are doing very high resolution imaging for us where we're counting plants and we're looking for plant species that aren't supposed to be in the field. Do you think you could detect weeds and tell us where those weeds are so we could use this sprayer to apply just where the weeds are? This is pre-Blue River acquisition. No, this is pre all of that. So we trained up a deep learning model to do that. And as we marched along, we engaged with other inputs providers, inputs OEMs, and we changed the performance requirements a little bit. We now go after weeds that are much earlier in their growth stage, so earlier on. But the basic product is we take a very low-cost drone with a high-resolution imaging system, and we scan every square inch of that field very rapidly, and we pick out the weeds that are between rows, the weeds that are in rows, and we map their locations. We bring them all together and enable the advisor to formulate a prescription with the right chemistry for the weeds that are present, with the right amount of chemistry for the weed pressure that's present on the field. And we turn that all around in anywhere from a few hours to certainly not more than 24 hours. And that gets delivered digitally, usually into the cab of a tractor that has this capability. And the chemistry is applied where the weeds are and not applied where the weeds aren't.
It seems obvious why this solution would be attractive to a farmer who can now spray less herbicides and save time and money. But Eric explained that it has cascading benefits for the entire supply chain.
It's actually very attractive from the entire value streams perspective. I suppose somebody making bulk chemistry overseas maybe not excited about it, but really the seed OEMs, the inputs OEMs really are not excited at all about over application of chemistry that doesn't do anything. They would much rather be selling differentiated products downstream around fungicide, around adjuvants that actually make the product work better. So they're seeing wallet share transfer to products that are more interesting, that are more yield enhancing. As we get more concerned, obviously, about sustainability, about regulatory compliance, putting anything on the field that isn't necessary is a bad thing. And we want to pull that off the field and be able to grow more sustainably. There may be even some limited yield benefits. Even if a soybean crop has been bred to tolerate certain herbicides, it can still damage them a little bit. And so we might even see a little bit of a yield bump from these kinds of technologies.
A key thing to understand about the aerial weed scout technology is that it separates weed detection from weed management. The alternative would be combining these two components, which is what See and Spray technology does. See and Spray technology uses sensors attached to a tractor to identify weeds and essentially direct the sprayer to target those weeds with herbicides. So it is detecting and spraying as it moves through the field. Eric explained the benefits of separating the detection of the problem from the herbicide application.
That opens up a whole bunch of opportunities. Within that time window, I can send my supply chain, my logistics trail out. So I just put just the right amount of chemistry, the correct products, the correct volumes out at the field edge. I can optimize the sprayers. So if a sprayer doesn't have this precision application technology, I would send that to a field that I know has a ton of weeds on it where I'm not going to be able to take advantage of this technology anyway. And I'll keep the best stuff where I'm going to save the most amount of chemistry. So as Brian alluded to, there are just some really strong structural advantages to being able to scout and analyze and characterize the management problem separate from the time that we send this really expensive piece of equipment to the field to go deal with the problem by applying chemistry.
There are also advantages around the speed the sprayer can move, as well as the vantage point of the drones. Here's Brian.
The machines can roll at full speed, right? They already know exactly where the weeds are. They have the prescription. They don't have to slow down to detect the weeds, so they can roll at full speed. Obviously, we're flying 40 to 80 feet above ground. We're outside the range of dust, dirt, debris. It's a pretty challenging environment when you're 4 feet off the ground. So the ability to see and have high resolution of these quarter-inch weeds without a lot of disruption to the sensors was also a structural or at least an advantage that we saw.
Cristina shared what she finds so compelling about Aerial Weed Scout from her viewpoint, assessing the market and adoption potential for agricultural technologies.
I think that this is something that we see in agtech more broadly. There is a focus on data collection, and there is, as you mentioned, we've transitioned from data poor to data rich. So there is an abundance of data. But what is extremely important is in this data rich environment, what can we build on top of the data that makes sense from a value proposition perspective to the grower? Otherwise, the models and the data collection, no matter how good the technology is, are not scalable. So one of the big lessons learned from Sentera was, how can I focus the technology? How can I focus the data libraries that I've built over these past 10 years into a use case that's compelling for the grower and for the channel, and it's a big enough pressure point where this technology, a new technology, can get scale.
The team believes Aerial Weed Scout makes for a good use case for a few reasons.
Weed resistance is a huge area of concern for farmers, and technology can enable products that are potentially more expensive if you apply them broad acre, but become economically feasible if you apply them with high precision. And that piece was a big component of our thesis. How can you use technology to make inputs that are working better, that can be more environmentally sustainable, and enable them to be economically feasible to be applied? And precision technology can be a key component to that. Also similar to that, regulatory pressures. And in terms of what we're seeing now, particularly what's happening with dicamba, where growers are having to navigate some of those regulatory changes. This is something that we see in the horizon, and we also see precision technology similarly being an answer when other products are not yet on the market, maybe are not available, are in pipeline. The simplest level was, can we use precision technology? Can we use the data collection and predictive models on top of that to enable new products that maybe are not economically feasible, or a reduction in inputs that can make sense from a profitability perspective for the farmer?
But it's not enough to say your solution does all these things. Farmers want proof that the technology will work. So Sentera ran tests last summer to gather some initial data on what this could look like on a field.
We had incredibly successful trials. We got results like 98% detection accuracy of a sub-quarter inch size weed that drove 66% herbicide savings for those fields. And we were able to turn those with fully automated workflows in less than 24 hours. So I think we flew a little over 13,000 acres. The average turn time was a little under 10 hours. And we calculate that from when the time that the drone takes off and then the time that the actual prescription is delivered. But we did that at a rate of speed where we were at 90 acres per hour of data capture, which in our world is unheard of, right? From a drone-based workflow, capturing that amount of imagery per hour, and then processing it into the prescription within less than 10 hours is really difficult to do.
And then did you spend time thinking about how to talk about the product and what the differentiations were? And so maybe if you could share a little bit of what else you learned in that sort of that initial test.
We did quite a bit of market research and voice of customer work, and we wanted that both from the partner level as well as the growers that participated. Our partners brought a lot of growers. I think the big feedback we got from growers was look, it's about herbicide savings. Sure, it's about cost savings, but for us, it's more about time savings, right? So if I'm a 3,000 acre grower and it takes me 2.5 days to broadcast spray my entire field, the only way that I can really get into a selective application strategy is if I'm still running those sprayers at full speed. Right. So without prior knowledge of what you're pouring that tank and where those nursing trucks are going to need to be to refill those spray tanks, there's a lot of idle time just sitting there waiting. And if you're having to fill up more because you're applying more, again, it's a speed issue. The growers that we talked to saw an immediate opportunity to save an incredible amount of time. And I think the last thing that we had heard is specifically more on the retail side, right? The custom applicators, those that are really servicing and supporting hundreds of thousands of acres and many different grower customers. There was a lot of excitement of our ability to turn that prescription within a couple hours. I think in our trials, we had 90% of our prescriptions were delivered by 6 a.m. the following day, which is important. If you collect that data at 4 p.m., right, you don't want to wait 24 hours for that. You want to be able to spray it the following day. But with that time gap, right, now they can do a lot of more logistics planning and they can offer a selective application strategy for their growers.
So Sentera has this technology that could have measurable and multifaceted benefits for farmers, and that could ripple through the supply chain. And they figured out how to talk about the product. But at the end of the day, even with the right technology and marketing, actually achieving widespread adoption can feel like a bit of a black box, especially in agriculture, where it is notoriously difficult to go directly to farmers and get them to adopt a new technology. So you have to get creative with the business model.
One of the big things that you need in this to be successful is the channel to the customers is guarded to some degree. The big ag retailers have their say and what products the farmers see and that kind of stuff. How did you think about your channel dynamics and figure out what's the right channel approach? How did you get access to growers?
Yeah, that's another great lesson learned. I think there was a direct model in the early days that Eric can talk about. It's hard marching up that hill, right? And trying to go direct to grower. And first of all, growers have so much coming at them, especially in the middle of the season. And there are so many companies out there that are trying to make an impact. They're almost forced to filter out everything to really just rely on their trusted advisors, right? The ones that have been there for them for 20, 30, 40 years. And that's the agronomic advisor, right? That's the retailer, right? Those relationships that they've leaned on for years and years to help drive their business. We were fortunate, I would say, to have had the opportunity to work with the large seed and chemistry companies for some of those use cases, whether it was R&D, plot trial-based data collection, or seed production, because we built trust with those relationships. And I think what we've realized is that in order for us to be successful, or really any company that's trying to innovate in this area, you have to be aligned with the rest of the ecosystem, right? Because that's who the growers rely on. So having those relationships and being able to expose those companies to the technology that we're developing, we know that we need to convince those companies that there's value for them with the technology and that everybody can participate, and ultimately that they're going to drive better outcomes for their growers, right?
Chuck, our first channel partner, just speaking to the power of the channel, we have tremendous respect for the ag channel because I actually think even though it's complex, it's very rational. We started with an equipment manufacturer, a premium brand. We went through their retail when we started offering product. And this was building crop health maps and building emergence counts from seed. And we put these products in, I think we were in 440 retail locations in North America. And we were selling product out of these retail locations. And we thought we really had something. And then we started getting calls that first year from the customers who was like, this is really cool. I've never seen my fields like this. What do I do with this? And that was this realization, as Brian said, hey, we're tapping into what we now know as agronomy, where the trusted advisor exists. And what we realized in that first year is there's like 40 factors that are driving the management decisions that a grower is taking into account when they decide what they're going to plant, what hybrids, what products, what management protocol. And we're doing a really good job of providing 8 or 10 of those, but we're not doing all 40. we don't actually even know exactly what to do with the 8 or 10. We're just producing some of the insights that go into supporting better decisions. And so we very quickly learn that unless we want to be a matchmaker or ask every customer, okay, who's your agronomist, who's the advisor, who's driving these decisions, that equipment retailer, as capable as they were selling our product, that's not the appropriate channel to deliver our technology. Our actual customer, we did not understand at the time, was the agronomist that was advising the grower on this very technical path that the grower has to follow to execute a good crop season. And so we learned that lesson, fortunately, very early on, and we have had tremendous respect for the role of the trusted advisor in all of the products going forward. And that's certainly true now. We're within a decision space that on the one hand, it's just herbicide selection, but getting that right and getting agronomist trust is essential, because the downside of perceived risk in crop protection failure is very high economically. It far outstrips the savings that we'll deliver if the grower doesn't see a good outcome. So we really spend a lot of time with the advisor ecosystem, making sure that they're comfortable and they understand that actually it elevates the role of the agronomist and the advisor to participate in this more complex process, in this case around the crop protection herbicide weed management strategy that's enabled by this technology, not threatened by this technology.
Cristina shared her thoughts on this go-to-market strategy.
Sentera is really focused on working with existing stakeholders in the system to go to the farmer. And I think that's important because it's really working in conjunctions with other equipment manufacturers or input companies that are already selling to the growers, and they're looking to solve the same problem. We have weed pressure. We don't have a good solution to that. If the cost of herbicide is roughly $60 today, with the cost of weed resistance is going to exceed $100, and that's going to be a major pain point. And those aspects that are relevant across all stakeholders enable Sentera to not go to the market alone, but go to the market in a systems-based approach with other stakeholders that are already working with the farmer that are looking to solve the same problem.
How are you making sure that the supply chain benefits all the way through it?
That's absolutely one of our biggest learnings, is making sure that the value to the channel is also very clearly defined. The key piece here is understanding that there is transitioning from a product-based value proposition to capturing margin on a service. So the technology in itself is a precision technology service. You're reducing the inputs, but the way that the channel creates value is by being able to make up for the reduction in inputs by creating a higher margin service while still keeping the cost lower for the grower. So it's a reallocation and at the same time a reduction between the input cost and the higher margin service component that a precision technology brings.
So the channel's moving away from selling a product to now selling a service, right? And so the channel, you'd say maybe they're selling less actual weed killers and whatnot, but now they're actually selling a service which is more consistent, as profitable or more profitable for them, so that the channel's not cannibalizing itself to be able to bring these products to market.
That's exactly right. And also, if we look in the context of weed pressure and the regulatory changes we talked about, there is also, over time, the potential for much more limited choices. So if new products are going to be introduced, we know that the cost profile of these products, of these new herbicides or ingredients, right now look higher than what's currently available for herbicide. And that means that precision technology will not only be just about a business model, it will be a necessity, because then you are enabling newer products that are more expensive to be applied and be just as effective, or even more effective if you take into account weed resistance than the current herbicide.
Another key component of Sentera's go-to-market strategy that they had to consider was price point. Farming is a small margin business, and farmers tend to be more risk averse. High upfront costs for technology can be a hard sell.
The direct monetization model, charging the grower in particular directly for a digital service, is has always been a challenge, and especially if it comes with very high upfront costs. There's also experimentation going on, again, with pay per acre. Some are experimenting with you pay on the proximal targeted application, there's a huge upfront cost, and then there's no per acre recurring. There are hybrid models. I think we, as a technology provider and a product provider, we're going to really look to the channel partners to determine how they want to monetize this. My suspicion is we have some idea about the value to the OEM or to retail about what a retained acre from a total program value. If I'm providing the program, the seed, the nutrition, the crop protection, the cover cropping, if I'm providing that whole program and the advisory services, it's extremely valuable. And this is a really strong enabler of full program value. My bet is it gets worked in to the grower. The value gets delivered as part of a holistic package, but we'll see.
And I think one thing that you will for sure see is no or little upfront cost, right? Because all of the solutions that you see trying to solve this issue, Eric mentioned that the proximal or the on-machine sensing solutions, they do come with a significant capital investment in the equipment to do that. And that is a barrier to adoption, right? Is growers aren't necessarily willing to take the risk of, okay, I'm going to try a targeted spray at the risk of weed escapes versus a broadcast application that I've been doing for decades. And having to make that upfront investment without knowing that you're for sure going to get that return, that has been a challenge that those systems have seen. And frankly, we have a sizable advantage with that because there is no upfront cost with it.
There's a ton of risk around weather and pests and other things like that. And the fact that you can come in and offer a solution that you don't have to pay for in advance and dramatically reduces that friction point and actually the risk that the farmer takes to see whether there's results or not. So I think that business model innovation is really important. And I think that's really smart the way you're looking at that. As See and Spray solutions continue to improve, how will Aerial Weed Scout evolve, and what are some of the ways you're going to continue to differentiate in the market?
So first off, weeds is the first use case for really what is a core technical capability of leveraging really high resolution imagery to solve in-season management problems and inform interseason planning. So there's disease pressure to look at, there's opportunity for late season fungicide, harvest timing, all would use the same pipeline of sense, inform, and then plan and action. I honestly don't see all that much competitive tension between a proximal See and Spray versus what Sentera does. There are a lot of technology tailwinds behind the way we operate. We're a large supplier of sensors that are used by other than Sentera all over the world. And there are a lot of parts of the world where today a Sentera sensor comes out of a box, goes and does some survey of a rice paddy or of a cornfield, and there's no human present. The data products are gathered, they're backhauled for analysis, and then the process repeats on a daily or every other day cycle. So the marginal cost of getting that data layer that drives decisions in some places is driven almost to zero. And the grower is going to become accustomed to a near continuous status of surveillance on the field that is separate from taking any action at all. It's just knowing what's going on and then injecting the knowing into optimally planning the timing of things like herbicide application, fungicide application, and harvest. And we are riding right along those tailwinds. We will be a part of that because our technology is positioned right at the core of what all of these things enable. So I'm pretty excited about this just being the first step in quite a long journey of building out these insights and driving towards more and more optimal management protocols for growers.
And as far as differentiation, I think that's a lot easier to do, right? Now you get timing information, like, okay, when do I spray? But it's a lot easier to do with a drone-based sensing platform, as long as you can get the information back fast enough that you can make a decision. But if you're forced to bring a big piece of equipment right out to the field that has these sensors there, that's a pretty big piece of equipment to bring out there and to capture that data. And so in the short term, as long as unit economics can continue to be strong and to give growers an ROI in year one because they're avoiding the upfront cost, we believe that that's going to only improve as data collection costs go down and down. And look, this is really fast developing technology, right? These sensors, the CVML behind it, the AI behind it, this stuff compounds and accelerates in its capabilities, and attaching that technology to very capitally intensive equipment becomes a challenge in trying to force those improvements through the infrastructure that you're attaching the sensor to. There's a lot of near-term and long-term opportunity to take advantage of this structural advantage that we have.
To really prove out the technology and business model, Sentera just launched an early access program that allows agribusinesses and farmers to preview Aerial Weed Scout. It also enables Sentera to gather feedback and build momentum for a 2025 commercial release. Brian explained why and how this program was developed.
The next step for us was really twofold. It was, okay, let's prove that this technology scales. Right? Let's make sure that everything that we measured in 2023 at a small scale can be done in thousands and obviously millions of acres. Right? And two, we knew that it's not going to be Sentera that brings it to market. It's going to be through channel relationships and relationships with the large either input OEMs, the seed and chem companies, or the equipment OEMs, or a combination of all, along with the retailers. So we invited a whole collection of all of them to participate in the trial. So we're giving them advanced access to VC the technology firsthand, to be able to validate all the claims that that we saw last summer. And we were obviously thrilled that we had a wide degree of participation. And so more than, I think, 80% of the market share for seed and chemistry participated with us. More than 50% of the equipment market share participated with us. As far as how this scales, it's going to be in partnership with all of them. And now the next phase is really just exploring commercial partnerships with all of these strategic partners of ours and understanding how it can add systematic value to their strategy. And we'll be exploring that over the coming months and identifying paths to market that way. Because, again, we know that it'd be a pretty tough hill to climb if we were going to do that on our own.
The idea is that the early access program will set Sentera up for a large-scale deployment of their technology next year. But Brian and Eric shared that they are already hearing some good feedback from growers. A
lot of our growers, they're saying, look, I'm going to reapply these savings. I'm going to reapply them to other applications. Maybe it's a fungicide that I can now put down because I now have an extra day to do it, and I have additional per acre bandwidth in my budget to be able to make that application.
One of the investors in Sentera is a person who also farms, and he said he can see the day, and instead of having yield contests, we're going to have gross profit per acre contests. Mm-hmm. And we're arming the grower with the data that they need to achieve the maximum economic success, the maximum success around sustainability. And if that last bushel of yield doesn't come at a net contributing margin, then they ought not do that.
Last question. Tell us about what's in the future. Where does it hold for Sentera?
We obviously are extremely excited about the program results from the early access program. Not just the data, right? Flying 90 acres per hour and saving significant herbicides for growers, but really just the partners' reaction, the feedback. And I think now that we've proven the technical validation of the technology and the workflow, and then also gained a significant amount of learnings about the advantages of this type of technology in the market, the next step is commercial validation with these partners and making sure that the actual structure of the commercial models fit with a chemistry company that's now going to be trying to bring to market new chemistries that are on patent and more expensive, but they provide a significant amount of value to the grower and allow them to bring those to market through the adoption of a targeted spray solution, and the adoption of that targeted spray solution becomes a lot easier because there's no upfront cost and because you know exactly what to pour in those tanks before you get to the field. We're excited. We're excited about the response that we've gotten, and we're excited to see where this goes. We expect a little bit more larger scale commercial validation trials, limited commercial release in 2025, with then a bigger commercial launch in 2026 alongside our partners.
Thank you for tuning in to the S2G podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave us a review, or share it with a friend. For more information or to connect with us, check out s2gventures.com.